Good morning for those on the West Coast and good afternoon for those around the country. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for a webinar on e-learning at scale with a modern identity program. Southern New Hampshire University and Integral Partners would like to thank you for taking some time today. My name is Corey Wilson. I'm the Vice President of Client Services and a co-founder of Integral Partners. Integral Partners is a national consulting company dedicated exclusively to identity. We have a number of clients in every vertical market, including several in higher education. And we've been recognized by our vendor partners on multiple occasions for delivering innovative services and excellence. A couple of housekeeping notes for the people that are attending the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and a link will be sent so you will be able to review or share at a later date. As well as we'll have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation, which will allow you to elaborate on any question that you'd like to get some more information from our speakers. I'm going to wait about one more minute if there's any additional attendees, and then we'll begin the presentation. Again, thank you for joining us. We're fortunate today to have a couple of experts that have a lot of insight into not only identity and how to build proper programs, but also higher education. You'll be hearing from Matt Connors, who's the Director of Information Security at Southern New Hampshire University. And Matt will share a little bit more about his background prior to his part of the presentation. But now I'd like to introduce Kevin Leggett, who's an advisory manager with Integral Partners and who's had extensive experience in higher education. Kevin will talk a little bit about some of the challenges that many of you on this call will be facing. Kevin?
Thanks, Corey. Glad to be here with everybody today. As Corey mentioned, I'm an advisory manager within Integral Partners, and in this role, I'm responsible for helping organizations understand the current state of their IAM landscapes, including their business processes and any technical reviews that may be required. Along with my colleagues, I provide guidance and recommendations to organizations on how to successfully address the various challenges associated with either launching or enhancing their IAM program. Prior to joining the Integral Partners team, I held various technical and management positions within several verticals, including higher education. And I have over 15 years of experience within IAM. I built the IAM program at Northeastern University and managed it for over a decade, during which time I was able to successfully position the program to quickly react to the various changes and challenges that impact most higher education institutions. So why is IAM potentially difficult within higher education? Well, despite our best intentions, there's a struggle to make the case and successfully maintain large service programs. The focus tends to lean more towards project-based implementations of services, whether it be supporting a new functional service or even large multi-year projects such as an SIS or an LMS replacement. Reacting to everyday challenges is also a primary focus of a lot of organizations. However, a viable and living IAM program is essential to being able to maintain services while being positioned for the unknown. Without a true program, momentum is easily lost as the next set of challenges for IT services arise. Now, making the case for investments in never-ending programs has always been a challenge. And our recent events might lend one to believe this is not the time for these types of investments, especially as schools focus on present-day challenges like returning to class. However, there is also a cost for not making these investments with regards to operational focus, agility, and even technical debt. With a renewed focus on how institutions operate core services, there is an opportunity now to ensure your IAM program is positioned to support your specific institution goals and challenges moving forward. Now, we're all aware of the role of committees within higher education, and they do provide a natural forum for socializing a program, which is essential for establishing funding and resource support. However, running your identity program by committee does have a cost with regards to agility. Ensure your program is not committee-centric, which when it comes to fundamental decision-making, and a true champion has been identified and empowered, that is key, to drive the program. Ownership with a holistic view and organizational understanding is key. Utilizing well-defined policies and standards will help establish how the various players will interact with the program and each other. Even without a solid IAM program, it's important to realize that you have resources, specifically people that are performing identity activities now that enable the school to provide key services. The problem with this approach is that these resources, without proper policies and standards, have become the decision makers. With a heads down focus, these keyboard decision makers often lose sight of the bigger picture. Especially now, you will need a strategic vision and solid business case to compete for the limited resourcing and funding that's occurring. What is also unique within higher education is a desire to support true collaboration along with our peer institutions. Beyond enabling the technical capabilities is the need to ensure one's identity house is really in order by providing a proper level of assurance on community memberships, allowing members of other communities such as researchers and faculty secure and trusted access to your services will distinguish you from other institutions. So what's some of the common challenges we all face? You know, when I was building the IAM program in Northeastern, my first goal was to better understand the current state of the processes, technologies, and challenges that impacted the institution. From time to time, I would ask people, you know, is this us, or is this what's happening in other schools as well? After discussion with my counterparts at other institutions, it became very clear to me that dealing with some of the core challenges to identity is crossing different institutions. Specifically, the lack of continuous and committed focus on program versus a project mentality, which I discussed earlier. Accepting the cheapest solution, which may be free, such as a shibboleth or grouper implementation, or investing in internal development efforts to address a current need. Keep in mind, as we probably are all aware, free is not free. Security, knowledge, and agility will over time be impacted by not making continuous review and investments in your IAM program. You know, higher education has historically had a low turnover rate for employees. This results in a deeper tribal knowledge of existing processes and solutions that may be represented in other verticals. This can result in some unique challenges with regards to staffing and the ability to take fresh approach to accomplishing objectives. Change in itself is a challenge. The prevalence of individuals having multiple roles in an organization is significantly larger within higher education compared to other verticals as well. For example, while I was at Northeastern, I had numerous roles, including being an employee, a faculty member, a student, I'm even a parent of a student. Managing these affiliations can be challenging, especially when you consider the amount of system of records that exist for people in higher education. The ultimate results of this function is identity vetting becoming a challenge. The number of systems an individual may initially be identified increases. The ability to create multiple identities per individual increases significantly. The duplication of identities has a cost, and you want to be positioned to limit them, especially since it can have a direct impact on the end user experience. You know, a key point is, in the online world, your initial experience is driven by your identity experience, and you most certainly will hear from clients first as problems arise. So what's the cost of inaction? Agility, credibility, morale, all of these are impacted if you make no investment whatsoever. The lack of the ability to provide solutions quickly to functional organizations during IAM will result in them driving your IAM solutioning. This is just a natural reaction to focus on getting the job done. Likewise, instead of being an enabler, your IAM services will be seen as a barrier to progress. This will impact your ability to implement IAM best practices via a coordinated approach that leverages relationships with solid institutions and organizations such as security, audit, data managers, even your ITS support. You know, there is a natural tendency not to reevaluate what is working, whether it's currently working practices or the status quo with technology. However, it's a mistake to become complacent. Don't accept the status quo. Be engaged with the various functional academic areas of your institution and try to anticipate what their challenges will be. Position your program to support them proactively. The demands on the service providers are changing, and doing nothing does not result in the status quo being maintained. Again, I just need to stress, an online experience begins with your identity experience. Without a solid IAM program with strong policies and standards, the person at the keyboard will continue to be the decision maker within your organization. This will impact operations, your agility, and increase risk to the institution. Again, ultimately, there is a cost associated with doing nothing. At this time, I'd like to introduce Matt Connors, again from Southern New Hampshire. Matt will provide his background, discuss his journey in building an IM program at Southern New Hampshire University. Matt.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate it. My name is Matt Connors. I'm the Director of Information Security at Southern New Hampshire University. I have 15 years of experience in various roles across IT, mostly focused within higher ed. I've held infrastructure, collaboration and messaging, identity, and most recently transitioning to information security roles. I came to SNHU about a year and a half ago now, or actually just over a year ago now. And it kind of brings us to our why now. Why did I come to SNHU? So next slide, please. We really, at Southern New Hampshire, we find ourselves in the next iteration of modernizing all of our foundational technology. We've been going through this technology transformation in response to our just rapid year-over-year growth, having now 160,000 online students, more than half of which are new to our organization within the last 5 years. In supporting that, we have 12,000 employees, 2/3 of which who are remote full-time, which in today's current climate has been not much of a change of pace for some, but a significant change for others. And for us, the challenge is during that time of rapid growth, the technology was evolving and we were making expeditious decisions and not necessarily a best practice aligned decision. So we came to the realization that we really needed to shore up that foundational technology. We are now in the midst of the third transformational effort, but we started with our learning management system, then our customer relationship management system. Out of that, we came out with a large number of learnings for us as an organization. And the fact that these complex and broad-reaching technology transformations were required for us. That left us with really one core system left to be disrupted, which was our student information system. And to Kevin's point from earlier, our identity tasks, we're not formalized under an identity program. In fact, we're actually performed within our student information system itself. So I was tasked with creating a new identity program and identity service. And when it came to that, I really started to ask myself, so what's the purpose of an identity and access management system? Next slide, please. This caused us to pull together the first of a few foundational questions and answers. This is our first answer, our vision statement, which is to provide simplified and appropriate access to SNHU system, information, and facilities. And we do that by supporting these three main pillars that go along with it. First and foremost, assuring reliable identification. At Southern New Hampshire University, our goal is to provide a single account to an individual, regardless of the number of affiliations they have with us, be it parent, student, faculty, employee, what have you. Second is to manage appropriate access. And for us, I suspect a lot of organizations struggle with this, and I know we do. Our relationships with our students and our employees tend to be more long-term, and as such, things usually just accumulate over the course of that lifetime. And third, and critical to us here at Southern New Hampshire, is deliver to easy-use services. We're an organization of size and means, which means that if one of our business partners does not enjoy the way we do something, there is a strong chance that they will go out and find a way to do it themselves. So we really need to find a way to deliver not only an easy to use service, but a desirable service as well. Next slide, please. Along those lines, our guiding principles are really something that we put out there so we could refer back to them as we really get into the weeds of analyzing and coming up with solutions to our complex identity issues. And for us, that starts with adopting IAM best practices, which means policies and standards driven from the get-go. The standards for us from a technology perspective allow us to build rapidly deployable services. So in the technology space, that means using the open standards of SAML, OpenID Connect, SCIM, so on and so forth. And from the practice side, we tend to focus and align towards NIST. And really the value for that in us is finding something to measure ourselves against and really have a baseline or something to achieve or strive for in all fairness. The second, the improving security controls is kind of the no-brainer statement, if you will, but we really have to balance that with the ease of use and reliability for our customer. Our students especially, it's first and foremost on our minds. Third, we really view at Southern New Hampshire that the data that we have is a strategic advantage for us, and that since we've been entrusted for it, that we do need to take those reasonable steps to protect it. For the flexible identity ecosystem, for us is absolutely critical. Just in the time that I've been here, we've added 4 new work streams, as we refer to them. They are different programs that we've brought on for students. And as such, we can't reinvent the wheel each time we do this, as we do it on such a regular basis. I also think that the identity ecosystem really underlines that idea that identity is not just a project, but really it's an ongoing practice, a program, if you will. Balance urgency with doing it right. I think this is truly the balancing act for any organization, but especially for us, we have so many things going at once, and we definitely have a drive to do it right and do it now. But the importance for us is to focus on what achieving completion means to actually getting the value and outcome that we really need. And 6, and this is one we actually go back to a lot more than we thought, would be transform and don't just replace. There is a strong propensity for some folks to say, okay, great, automation is key. We're going to automate the life out of everything. And for us, while automation is important, we wanted to make sure that we didn't take an existing risky or faulty process and just do faster and more of it. So really, it's about highlighting and finding that potential benefit and improvement. Next slide, please. Next was to really set a set of program goals for us. These are our high-level outcomes that we emphasize to our stakeholders and partners across the organization. So first and foremost, in order to be successful and deliver that one account experience, we needed to do this for the entire organization. So that university-wide set of IAM policies and solutions. 2, to minimize business interruption, we fully acknowledged at the start that we would be rebuilding the car as it's going down the road at speed. 3, the scalable and adaptable solution to support long-term growth. Growth is a fact of life for us at our organization and has now become a strong driver for us as well. And we needed to start making decisions that enabled our future goals and shift away from our previous what's good for now mindset. 4, it was really critical for us when creating a new service and engaging our stakeholders that we educate and build this standard terminology across the organization. With everyone speaking the same language, it really became much easier for us to share our vision and ideas, and also for them to share their vision and ideas of what they'd like to see out of an identity program back with us. And 5, and I think this tends to get lost at plenty of organizations, is the develop and implement a plan for operationalizing it. I think at times we do a great job of staffing and resourcing and funding particular projects. However, when they wrap up and hit day 1 operations, there tend to be challenges with maintaining the momentum that was built up over the ramp up to the project itself. So it's really important to focus on how do you keep that going. Next slide, please. So for us, with these guiding principles and goals in mind, we started to try to build our concept of our identity system, our identity program. So first and foremost, we knew to be successful that we have to tie our outcomes to that of the organization itself. We primarily focused on improvement in student experience, which was a strong one for us to latch on to. I know and have worked at organizations where those university drivers are not always the most clearly stated thing, so if they're not documented, I would suggest that, go get out there and try to draw them out. Find those board briefings, state of the university addresses, and find the ongoing themes in those and really try to tie to those if at all possible. Second is to thoroughly document that current state, and that doesn't just mean from a technology perspective, but also a business process perspective. For us, it was critical to really understand how things are going today. So we wanted to make sure that we broke down those silos and those groups, and not just focus on the IT side of things, but also move it from a true life cycle diagram. And third, it's critical to capture the applications and architectures that support those things. You're not going to be able to propose a plan of replacement without understanding, what you need to move away from in that process. We accomplished this documentation of current state through engaging in an organizational listening tour, and it was a very successful practice for us. We found that the small one-on-one or small group meetings were absolutely critical in allowing folks to create a safe environment where they felt okay to open up and share those pain points with us and share their point of view, which was critical in our understanding of creating a across the board life cycle picture of how identity information flows into and around and out of the organization. We wanted to make sure that we captured the entire picture, and since we were so focused on student experience, it was important for us to engage with those normal stakeholder groups that you would think of, your HR group, your registrar, perhaps legal. But we also said, really, who can best capture for us the day-to-day student experience and interaction with our student the most? And at Southern New Hampshire, that really takes the form of our student advising team. An advisor is assigned to a student at the beginning of their journey, and for the most part, stays with that student through graduation. So that group is really key in getting those student perspective learnings for us. By taking the holistic view of and asking the same questions, especially around point of views and pain points, you can really start to find those ones that repeat themselves on a regular basis. And I can't stress the value up front of I can't stress the value enough of working up front on this analysis and this pre-work, so to speak, as opposed to just going to the Gartner Magic Quadrant and picking a top right solution for whatever you're trying to do. Next slide, please. So with all this information on the current state, what we did is then went back and started to detail the gaps that exist in our current setup, and then assign value to those things. And of course, you're going to find things that are efficiency gains, things that need change, things you might have gaps in privacy, security, risk, agility, what have you. But the key pieces for us is what we found in the, I believe, 140 something meetings that we conducted over a few months were really things like name change was a challenge for us. That was a consistent pain point that we heard from almost every stakeholder that we spoke with. But another thing that we discovered that wasn't really known within the organization, because we hadn't taken an end-to-end view before, was that an example of an employee separation that took almost 35 people to complete, more if you had certain job types. And that was a real eye-opening learning for some of our more senior members of our organization. The next piece is after you find those gaps, is to find plans and solutions to improve those. And it's critical that this next juncture really take that plan and translate the benefits of that work into business values. And for us, those were to improve student experience, respond to market innovation, and transform to a truly digital business, which is an openly stated goal for us as an organization. So we then started to ask ourselves, how do we sell this? How do we get it off the ground? Next slide, please. So as we built our actionable strategy, it was really important that we aligned the strategy with any of the outcomes and user interests that there were. We did make a lot of changes to the initial draft of this. We did share it with a lot of those folks that we spoke to during the listening tour, and really started to treat it as a living document. And it was really that communication and feedback that gave us the information we needed to pivot to address pain points. This is an ongoing process. What was a pain point today might be less painful before or after. I just want to make sure that we get, speak a little louder, sorry. Is that any better? Let me try to turn up my mic volume. All right, we'll go with that from now then. Important in our planning was to really want to correlate the cost that we were asking for to realistic outcomes. And we did that by building a roadmap, by showing the when, the where, and the cost of the plan. It was important that we not really get into saying, hey, we're going to solve world hunger with our single sign-on solution or our MFA solution. It was to really be open and honest about what pain points we were solving and when. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate that. And really, for us, it was also critical to highlight that cost value mix. For us, it was to say, because anytime you make an ask, the immediate thing is going to be great. We'd love to do that. We think this is a fantastic idea. Can we cut 20% out of it? And that's just the normal part of getting anything off the ground in any organization, really. So for us, it was important to know at what point did we make a cut so deep that it was, hey, this is maybe not the thing to do right now, and we should shelf this idea and then move forward with another one instead. The other piece was to organize the team to support this new strategy. Identity is such a broad-reaching and varied practice that a direct reporting structure was not going to be successful for us. So we ended up with a combination of matrix and project-based reportings. Also wanted to highlight that for us, the outside voice was actually very critical. Bringing in integral partners definitely added that, but don't take my word for it, so to speak. So by answering the what's in it for me and the, hey, clearly we know what we're talking about, these industry professionals agree, was really critical for us into maintaining and building that buy-in. By partnering closely with those non-IT business stakeholders, we really did build a lot of enthusiasm, especially when it came to the solving pain points. And we really built that network of champions, which we then eventually transformed into our stakeholder advisory board. And it was made up of a lot of folks from the listening tour, but as well as in some cases their bosses, as folks started to hear about what we did and what we're doing and planning to do. They wanted to become more involved and just have their voice heard in that conversation. And really, that came to fruition. The hugest benefit we got out of that when it came to the executive leadership and the funding discussion. When that out there and our light item came up, while I wasn't in the room, there was nobody in that room who was surprised by the ask that we had. So what we've done at this point was we've built the plan, learned the pain points, and have now that approval and buy-in and budget. So how do we become successful? How do we turn that into results? Next slide, please. So we have this very sizable roadmap, in all fairness, a multi-year roadmap. So where do we get started? How do we get there? We started with, we really pushed and advocated for the governance concept. For identity, for us, our governance team is made up of primarily folks from across the organization that really aren't IT focused at all. We did push driving to policy and establishing consistency with that group, especially those focus champions from our HR team, our student experience team, our student advising team, as well as our legal team as well. And with the actionable roadmap we had, it really helped us reduce pushback and highlight the outcomes, especially the when certain outcomes were delivered over others. This was also really helpful for us when the roadmap became more of a living document. If a pain point would crop up, so to speak, as an issue of the day, we'd say, great, we would love to help you out with that. This is what it means to our roadmap. So we are going to deprioritize these, 2-3 efforts in order to bring a different one up to be completed sooner. And in that case, we found a lot of value in that, especially when it came to completing, some things out of order. And we actually stuck to the plan, I think, more than we thought we would initially in some cases, because certain folks didn't want to forego those bigger pain points earlier or later. We did have a lot of success with our HR team. It's an example I really like to highlight. Traditionally, our HRM system was completely managed outside of the IT organization. And they were interested in building an MFA solution, especially. In talking with them, we did find that they were spending an awful lot of time supporting authentication issues, as well as the wanting to bring in multi-factor authentication. So, as part of the listening tour and hearing that pain point, we really spoke to we as IT would love to take on the support calls and everything for you if you would come onto our single sign-on solution, and we can roll out MFA to go along with that. And by showing that we would solve that pain point and give them some value, and that we would be saving them between 9 to 10 hours a week in support calls per support tech, of which we have 3. So, almost a full FTE's worth of time. They were really bought in on coming into the central IT solution, which we also made improvements to address some of their initial trepidation and concerns. And it just really was a key learning for us, and a great example for us to solve a problem for a stakeholder. Next slide, please. So I want to wrap up with some lessons learned and recommendations. I can't say enough about the aligning the principles with the strategic goals of the organization. It really did make some of those, especially budget ask conversations, a lot easier as to this is how we're aligned and this is what we're supporting. The stakeholder support, I think for every hour that we've put into it, it has paid dividends, 2-3 times over. And especially focusing on what issues you solve for them and understanding their point of view and speaking their own language. And then not only that, but educating them to speak the language of that is identity. We wanted to focus on the customer experience. Like I said, viewing the student as a customer is critical, especially now as we all become online schools, be it for the short term or the long term. As Kevin mentioned, identity is really the first interaction that your student has with your organization. And you also need to keep in mind that in the online space, the barrier to entry and exit is a lot lower than it is in the traditional campus experience. To move schools in the online space, you're not moving cities, states, towns, what have you. Really, you're going to another website, and meaning that the customer experience really is going to become more of a differentiator than ever, especially as it folks to online learning. For us, we really got a lot of benefit from the expert perspective, that outside perspective. The folks at Integral were really critical in saying, okay, great, we brought on these brilliant identity folks here at SNHU, but is it them just trying to build an empire, or are they really trying to do best for the organization? And Integral was critical in balancing that message for us. Second to last is really build on those standards. As you want to grow, the things that divide our customers in whether it's our College of Engineering, our College of Business, or what have you, those differentiators are less and less as you move into a more scaled solution. And then lastly is the endeavor to be flexible and agile, but disciplined to those core values and principles, which I know is an easy thing to say, but it's definitely a hard thing to do in practice. And it's something that's definitely a challenge for us in higher ed. I think now I'm going to transition it back to Corey, and we're going to open it up for some Q&A.
Thank you for your time on that. And there is an ability to ask questions if you like. I'm going to let you see some of the faces to the voices you've been hearing. We have a couple of questions to start with. One of the questions I think would be directed to Matt, which would be, what are some of the key technologies you use to help your online schooling to be a success?
So ironically for us, the initial driver to success for online learning was the number of people that we put behind the support for the technology. So our initial learning management system was Blackboard, transitioned to Brightspace now. And there was a lot of focus on how courses were delivered, and that was a key piece of success for us. But really the piece that filled in the gaps for us was that student advising group. You know, and that is in all fairness, that is a small army of people whose sole mission is to drive towards the success of their assigned students. So it's actually, for us, it's a mix of technology and people.
Another question from Matt. What were some of the key items in your roadmap that you needed to tackle first? How did you really weight the priorities and then determine what to do? And then do you have any metrics around before and after, although you're somewhat early in your program?
Yep. So for us, the key items to the roadmap, and I've done the roadmap concept a few times at two different organizations actually. And I do want to say that by focusing on the pain points is what allows us to be successful. A big pain point for us was single sign-on. It wasn't what I would call actual single sign-on. So by focusing on something that was a broad spectrum pain point, we were able to achieve some success early on and look for some of those easy wins from a transformational perspective. How we weight those things is, first and foremost, we do a risk assessment for almost everything that ends up on our roadmap. And we go by what's going to give us the most impact for the quote unquote least amount of effort, so to speak. And our big metrics for there are, especially when it comes to the pain points, if it's a customer experience or student experience pain point, we try to measure those through tickets delivered to our help desk or to whatever the supporting body is for it. And we look to measure in reduction in those, and hopefully, at the very least, an increase to our self-service functionality, which we deliver through ServiceNow.
Question for Kevin. What would be the top recommendation that you would make for schools that are just trying to get started?
I think it's important to realize. Sorry, I thought it was muted. I think it's important to realize that, as Matt pointed out, you're not going to be able to boil the ocean. So we hear that term a lot, and with regards to launching a program and getting going, I think you need to focus on what you really are trying to accomplish short term, and then come out with that roadmap going longer term. And the key understanding is understanding your current state. Now, you're not going to fully understand 100% of what's going on, but you know, many times I've been completely surprised how many organizations I've gone into and found out with the completion of the current state mapping that I would hear from somebody within the organization saying, this is the first time I've seen the complete picture. It is actually amazing. People do have an understanding of what they believe is occurring, but until it's brought together visually and put in front of you to get a complete understanding, it's remarkable to me how many times I've heard that. This is the first time we've seen this complete picture of what's going on. And then you work together and partner together to point out the key pain points and address those in the roadmap earlier rather than later. So I think, again, understanding current state, not being intimidated by the discovery phase. You know, a good advisory is not going to result in a series of consultants coming in with a series of questions and asking you to go off and do your homework. We're going to partner with you to help facilitate those conversations. There's sometimes a natural hesitation, especially within higher ed, some of the functional organizations, to having somebody come in and really be poking around their business. But it's important that you level set up front with a strong champion, as Matt has been at SNHU, to basically ground set what's occurring and why they are going to benefit from this process.
Kind of related to that, Matt, question, and I think that's an excellent answer, Kevin. Matt, what was the process of starting the advisory board at SNHU? And a couple of follow-ups on one is, did you get pushback on it? And then secondly, kind of as you've operationalized it, how often does your advisory board meet, and is it static or are you adding people to it?
Sure. So standing up our advisory board, we initially pulled it from those, what I would consider really strong voices that we had from our listening tour, but it was also the combination of the strong voices who also had a particular level of standing within the organization. We do add people to the stakeholder advisory group on a regular basis. We meet quarterly now. Before we were meeting monthly as things were starting to ramp up. The pushback pieces we got for it were primarily related to, well, I want to be on the governing body versus the stakeholder advisory board. Our governing body has the ability to basically shut down projects or ramp up new projects, and they're more directly influential. The stakeholder advisory group is, here's our direction, this is what we are doing, let us know how this is impactful or beneficial to you in ways that we haven't articulated yet. So that has been successful. The pushback we do get at times is, sometimes we are not meeting frequently enough. We do try to keep a good clip with projects. So, again, just like the roadmap's a living document, it's a living group. So we try to be flexible there.
A couple more questions here. Matt, this one's kind of specific. I don't know to what extent you can divulge it, but what technologies did you evaluate and what did you select to go through for SNHU's single sign-on experience?
Sure. So for single sign-on for us, it was very much a cost-benefit analysis. I'll be completely upfront. It was so broken when we first started that small changes went a long way. So we are actually, we're using Microsoft Azure Federation services for it, trying to transition mostly to the managed domain experience. We obviously evaluated all industry leaders in the spaces, the Oktas, the Pings, and the what have yous. And it really came down to we have such an investment in the Microsoft space already, and we would make so many gains just by standardizing on a single platform that we opted not to go with a independent commercial offering at that time. Don't get me wrong, I think in a year or two that story might change as folks tend to start to expect a more seamless experience. But we were able to make so many gains just by standardizing on the Azure platform.
And Corey, if I could add to that, as part of the initial advisory we had at Southern New Hampshire, that was an initial pain point that Matt and his team brought up, the single sign-on experience. Yeah. So we were brought in to focus on the complete breadth of IAM, whether it be identity governance, privileged access, and access enforcement as well. But I think we quickly came to the conclusion that the direction he wanted to go in with Azure was something that was sound and solid for Southern New Hampshire's abilities at this time. So quickly moving that up on the roadmap and just moving on with that and tackling that, since it was such a pain point and is very, very visual.
And thanks for that elaboration, Kevin. And this is an interesting one. As we know, we are in a whole different experience. And the question for Matt is, with what's going on with COVID and the pandemic and this education, how is it affecting the growth at SNHU, who's been somewhat of a pioneer in online education? Are you seeing anything different? And if you are seeing different in demand or interest, what might that be?
So for us, the biggest impact was it really forced us to start bringing in some ideas that we had in the background around creating say an elevated campus experience, which is kind of like a hybrid campus and online delivery. We actually brought those plans forward. And what we really saw, especially with the economic impact of COVID especially, was to offer this $10,000 a year tuition goal by 2021, which we first started implementing by effectively delivering a grant for all our first-year campus students next year. So any of our incoming first-year students are basically going tuition-free in the fall, and that really was to push back against what is a completely natural reaction of being in these scary times and saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to take that gap year. I'm going to forego enrollment until the spring, the winter, the summer, or even a whole year. So we really wanted to encourage that. In terms of the online space, we're like everybody else in the world. We are holding on to cash just like everyone else. And as such, we did prepare for a drop in enrollment, but as of now have not seen that. So far, so good.
We have about one more question, and then we'll be able to give some people back some time in their day. And maybe Kevin, you can elaborate on this, but we'll start with Matt on it. Was on the future state creation of knowing where you were at, and then maybe you went in with some, presumptions of where the future state would be. What were some of the lessons learned and some recommendations of being able to maybe disconnect what you think the company or what you think the stakeholders are going to want versus what you actually learned, and what maybe you can alert some of the folks on the webinar on things to look out for around what you're creating, not just what you have.
Yeah, the what we're creating versus is what we have was a huge piece for us. We did not want to ask for the sun and the moon and the stars when it came to new technology pieces, and I think we really did a great job with that around the single sign-on piece by going with what was basically an already paid for solution. Another lesson learned for us was to be flexible with that roadmap for future state. We thought we were going to be doing an identity governance setup first, but because of the feedback and the pain points, we actually, to Kevin's point earlier, we brought that single sign-on piece way forward on the roadmap by almost a full year. And then the transforming and really working with the business around what it takes to achieve that future state. It's great to hear that IGA and all that awesome stuff is going to do for us, but it's a lot of work for us, especially where we're moving from a system that's not really designed to be an identity governance tool to an eventual identity governance setup. So really the big keys for us was to be flexible with our roadmap and be responsive.
I guess what I would add there is that the future state is not end state. It's constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. But let's be clear, that means you still need to show progress. So I talked earlier about momentum and maintaining momentum on the roadmap. Adjusting the roadmap is necessary due to conditions, ensuring that there's proper communication and there's alignment with people and understanding with what's going on with the roadmap. But keep in mind, it's not a 5-year plan where there's the stake in the ground in the future and you're running towards it. You're constantly changing and evolving it and reacting to circumstances, which gets back to the concept of having a true identity program and not a project. That's something that's easily adaptable and flexible to ensure that the challenges to the institution are being met.
And then last, in closing on this, Matt, do you have any final thoughts? I mean, you guys are 160,000 students on a quarterly basis. The importance of online education kind of all of a sudden rapidly being mission critical for universities. Any thoughts for your peers on just, kind of what your journey's been and what you want to leave them with?
Sure. So we actually just made available, I believe a couple of weeks ago, a strong presentation around the lessons learned from SNHU overall. So not just my own thoughts at SNHU.edu/learn. And there's a lot of content there around how to transform the learning that is traditionally delivered face-to-face to online learning. So I think that's a key piece to us. I think without that, any of the great work that we're doing in the identity and transformation space is not as impactful without people to share those lessons with.
Well, that concludes our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Hopefully you found it informative. If you'd like any follow-up with either Kevin or the experts from Integral Partners, you can contact us directly. We'll be having a copy of this presentation and webinar on our website, as well as a link will be sent to you. I want to thank Matt and Kevin for your contributions, and I want to wish everyone good health, and hopefully we'll be able to modernize some identity infrastructure at your higher education institutions. Appreciate your time, and be safe, everyone.
Thanks so much, everybody.